Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jesse Lee Peterson. I appreciate your letters and your phone calls, your emails. I tell you that they're very, very, very interesting. We're going to have some of the guests on this show who disagree with me. So I look forward to that. My guest today, let me just tell you this. We are rebuilding the family. I run a nonprofit organization called BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And our purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. Focus is on the black man, but we work with all people. Today, we're dealing with entrepreneurship. A lot of black folks, especially black men, are afraid to go into business. They have all kinds of excuses of why they should not do it. So we have an expert here today that's going to tell you how to do it. Kwame Granderson is my guest. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Before I get into what you're doing, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you grew up.
Sure. I was born in London. I came to the United States when I was about 6. First to New York, then to Southern California. Grew up pretty much in East LA/South Central. And from there, moved to a small apartment in Beverly Hills, went to Beverly Hills High School, and then went to UCLA, and then went to Harvard Law School.
Amazing. You grew up, I read that you grew up with both parents in the home, father and mother.
That's right.
Father and mother. Do you think that gave you a certain advantage over anybody really, but blacks who don't have both parents in the home?
I mean, I don't know about advantage. I know that my father was a very important influence in my life. He, along with Muhammad Ali, are probably my 2 role models. So, you know, a lot of times in the business context, people ask me, you know, if I had any business role models per se, and the answer generally is no. It's pretty much my father is my primary inspiration as a male figure.
What did you like about Muhammad Ali that he became a role model?
He's just a very strong person. He had, you know, whether or not you agree with his beliefs, he held very strong convictions, and he stood by his convictions, and that's important. You know, people are never going to completely agree with each other, but you know, it's important to stand for something.
Did you agree with him when he refused to serve in the military?
I mean, I don't fully know the full context of why he made that decision. I know at the time he had joined the Nation of Islam, and I don't know if that had something to do with it. So, you know, whether or not he was justified in doing that, I would need to know more about his personal reasons for making that decision.
Right. You know, it's not about politics today, but I do want to ask, Hugo Chavez made called President Bush an evil man. Or the devil, or something like that. What was your reaction to that comment?
I thought it was out of line. I mean, I don't think that kind of language really is productive. You know, whatever his opinions of Bush might be, you're not going to get very far when you resort to that kind of name calling, because then what's going to happen is you're going to draw a line in the sand, and you're just going to be arch enemies, and nothing is going to get accomplished. And I think both countries have reason to continue to do business together. I
was absolutely outraged that you have a dictator coming into our country and attacking our president. We have called for a ban that he should never come here again. Mm-hmm. I was just blown away by that. And I was even more shocked, well, not shocked, because black people do some weird things, not all of them, most. Mm. I was shocked that he was able to speak at a black church in Harlem, I believe it was Mount Olive Baptist Church of Harlem. Did you hear about that? With Danny Glover and all those guys?
You mean subsequent to his comments? Or
yes, afterward, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with...
Yeah, it was a shame. But I want to go into what you're doing. You're a graduate from UCLA, a graduate of Harvard. That's some serious stuff. Mm-hmm. Did you get into Harvard because you earned your way, or was it because of affirmative action?
Well, I got, you know, I have no idea. I wasn't on the panel that made the decision. What I do know is that I got straight A's at UCLA for 4 years straight in every single class that I took. I got, with the exception of a couple A minuses, I got an A in every class. and I won about 10 different scholarships, so essay contests, etc. So I guess I would say if I didn't get admitted, I would be curious to see who would have gotten admitted, because I don't think there's any more I could have won at UCLA.
I read your profile and I read that about you as well, and I thought to myself, this is why we don't need affirmative action, because when you have black people who are succeeding in life because they're earning their way, it still put like a stigma on them. It looked like they got in because of affirmative action. Do you support affirmative action?
You know, my view on affirmative action is that when it was initially implemented, there were very, justifiable reasons for its implementation. A lot of those reasons are not quite as acute as they used to be. Whether or not at this point the reasons have subsided to the point where it's totally unnecessary, I haven't really spent a lot of time looking into that. I know that there reasonable people disagree on the matter. I don't. It's not something that I personally felt that it was important for me to rely on. In my household, my father basically encouraged me to study as hard as I possibly could and attempt to get the best grades that I could, and that best grade being an A, always.
That's amazing.
And so,
So you made A's all the way through UCLA?
In every class.
You didn't hang out at all? You just studied 24 hours a day? How did that happen?
Well, what happened was I got to UCLA and I went to the counseling office, and at UCLA they have tutoring for minority students. And so I went to that office and I said, my parents need for me to get an A in every class, and it's very important to me. It's very important to my family. They're all watching me. I'm the first person in my family. My uncle and I got into UCLA at the same time. We're the first people to go to college. And so the person with whom I was speaking said, well, that's very admirable, but when you get that first B or that first C, you shouldn't be too devastated, and it happens to everyone. I said, that's fascinating. That's not what I asked you. What I asked you was, how do I get straight A's? And she replied, same response, no, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that everybody gets a B. And so obviously that conversation wasn't going anywhere. Right. So after a couple more conversations like that, what I decided was that there was one person who has gotten an A in every single class that I will take for the next 4 years, and that's the professor teaching that class. Right? If you're teaching the class, you have to have gotten an A in your own class, right?
Right.
So I started going to the library outside of the normal homework and reading all the essays written by the professors teaching the classes I was taking, and teaching myself, because neither one of my parents had a formal education. So I started teaching myself how to write, college level essays. And in high school, my strength was really math. I got a 5 on the AP calculus test. I won an award in high school for math. My English skills were very weak, but I decided to be an English major.
That's amazing.
So I went and I got a lot of flashcards, vocabulary flashcards. I would read those from class back to my dorm back to class, and I would read these A papers. And then the other thing that I did was I would go to the professor's office hours and I would say, look, you assign an 8 to 10 page paper. I would take the lower limit, double it. So if it was 8 to 10, I would write a 16-page paper. And I would go to the professor and I would say, do you mind looking at this a couple weeks early, because I'm really excited about your class. I'm wondering if I can get your feedback. They'd give me feedback. I'd go back. I'd rewrite it 3-4 times, typically an average of 8 drafts for every paper.
That's amazing. So were you motivated because you were the first, or because of your parents, or all the above? What was it about you? Let me ask you, what type of person are you?
Well, my license plate at UCLA said discipline, right? And that's pretty much characterizes my personality.
Have you always been that way?
I don't think I was always that way. When in high school, I wasn't nearly as disciplined as I was when I got into college. What sort of happened when I got to college was, in high school, I was a dancer. I used to, when pop locking and break dancing and all that, I was in one of those groups, and we'd go around and battle people and whatever else. And I was even though I got a 4.0 in high school, I was very focused on dancing, whatever else. I applied to Stanford, and I didn't get into Stanford because I was told I didn't have enough extracurricular activities. But no one told me that, and my family didn't know that was important because none of us had gone to college.
Right.
So my mother flew up to Stanford and said, "What are you guys doing? He's a really good student." And they said, "Well, sorry, he doesn't have extracurricular activities." So when I got to UCLA, I was pretty pissed off. So, the goal at UCLA was to get straight A's, get accepted to Stanford for law school, and then decline it. Apply to Harvard, apply to Yale. I only applied to 3 schools when I went to graduate school: Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. And Stanford was my sort of backup, my final choice. Harvard and Yale were my first choices.
So did you reject Stanford?
Yeah, because I ended up going to Harvard. But I wanted to sort of vindicate myself that I had the right to be a Stanford student by reapplying.
That is amazing. That's an amazing story. I want to ask, a lot of black Americans, not all of course, but most, are afraid to go into business. Or they have a whole bucket full of excuses as to why they can't do it. The white man won't let you have money, whatever. What does it take for a person to go into business and succeed in that business?
Hard work. If this country happens to be one of the most favorable environments for starting a business. That's why there's so many business owners in this country. It's just very easy. It's almost, ridiculously easy in this. You file some paperwork with the Secretary of State, and you pay him a couple $100, and you have a corporation, right? So from there, it's about hard work, meaning, you get there before your customers, you stay after your customers, and you're working harder than everybody else, and you're focused on making it succeed. I've never gotten a small business loan. I've never even applied for one.
How does one decide what type of business to go into? Lots of people don't know what they want to do. How do you decide what you want to do? What type of business?
I think you have to do something that you care enough about that you're willing to work hard at it. Right? It doesn't have to be your life calling, as it were, but it has to be something that you can get motivated enough that every day you're going to be able to get up and do that without your interest sort of waning. And so it could just be something that you have a natural ability for, or it could be something that you think it could be completely sort of profit-driven, that you think there's enough money in it that it's worth working hard to do well at it.
And I'm going to ask you about that. We're going to take a quick break.
Sure.
We're going to take a quick break and come back to that point. Back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Jesse Peterson. We're talking about business, how to start a business. Kwame Granderson is my guest. We're going to get into what you do, exactly the type of business you're into. Before break, I asked, how can one decide or know what they want to do? Most people don't know what to go into. Let's say you walk around in life, you just have no clue. You're working an 8-hour job maybe, but you want to find something to do. What would you suggest?
I would not suggest just going straight into entrepreneurship if you have no idea what to do. To me, it makes much more sense to work and try different work environments until you find something that really sort of ignites something for you. So, in other words, if you just wake up arbitrarily and decide, okay, I'm going to start a printing business. I mean, you might find that you have no interest whatsoever in printing, right? So to me, the first step it would be work, unless you have a family tradition of a particular type of business, say maybe multiple generations of restaurant owners, right? But short of that, seems to me you'd have to have some exposure to that field to get a sense for whether or not it's something you would even like.
You're into real estate in every possible way that one can be into real estate. Tell us about your business and how did you get going?
How I got started?
Yeah.
How I got into real estate was my parents basically used real estate to pull our family out of a very dangerous neighborhood that we lived in, where my life was threatened several times, and so I basically saw two people, just by putting together real estate transactions, catapult themselves economically from a very low place to a very high place. And when I was at UCLA, I mean, not UCLA, Harvard, I was a senior in Harvard, and I thought, I think that if I take what they've already built and just fine tune it a little bit, I can sort of take it to the next level. So when I got out, my mother said to me, "Okay, Mr. Big Shot, with your big degrees and whatever else, I got this deal. It's over on a street called Van Buren. I think it's worth 170. They're willing to let it go for 111. Make it happen." And I said, "Well, can I borrow some money?" She said, "No. You're not going to waste my money on your,
That's right.
And so I said, "Well, can I go to your friends and borrow money from them?" She said, "They can do whatever they want. It's their money." So I went to a couple of her friends. I borrowed some money, put it together, took some digital pictures before digital cameras were popular at all. When digital cameras first came out, I took some digital pictures. That was impressive to them. And then I put together a presentation, and they accepted it, and that was my first deal. And then from there, I just kind of snowballed into more and more deals.
And how old were you at that time?
25.
25. And so tell the people what you're doing now, because you have a real estate company, a construction company, you help find the loans, you help manage, you have a management service as well, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about.
Well, no, that's you articulated it perfectly. I mean, I've got a mortgage company to the extent that people need to refinance to get the capital to start. And I happen to think of home equity as an SBA loan, by the way. I have a realty company that helps find the investment properties below market once you have the capital. I have a construction company to renovate it to the extent it needs renovating. And then I've got a property management company. I've got an independent escrow company, and I've got an on-site architect.
How many people do you have working for you?
About 40.
40 people. I noticed in talking to you, I read your background, and I had to look at your picture over and over again to make sure you were black, because a lot of black people don't have that mentality. Do you think the way you see things and the way you think about things had a lot to do, not only with your parents, of course, but because of where you grew up at, going to Beverly Hills High, that environment, did that encourage you in any way?
Oh, no, Beverly Hills High School most certainly did not, because at Beverly Hills High School, I was the one kid who was eating his lunch at his locker while all the other kids were up in the cafeteria, because I didn't know anybody, and I pretty much did that for 4 years. I mean, I had, I think, one friend the entire time I was there.
For 4 years?
For 4 years.
Why did you make friends with other people?
Well, because I came from a totally different environment, and a lot of the kids at Beverly Hills High School went to Beverly Hills Elementary School, they went to Beverly Hills Junior High School, and a lot of them know each other.
Okay.
And so it can tend to be very cliquish. All right, so when I got there, I was not part of any of those cliques. And, I'm somewhat of an introvert, and so, I don't have the kind of personality where I'm going to go out and sort of kind of make friends if they're not inviting me in. So Beverly Hills High School definitely did not shape my personality. I just have a very intense family. The ethos in my family was, we gave our blood, sweat, and tears for you to even have this opportunity. The least you can do is get straight A's.
Yeah.
That you owe us
I
that.
agree.
And so when I got to Harvard, I had blown out the muscles in my eyes because because I was doing so many. I was in UCLA. I was writing a book, and I was taking the real estate exam, and I was also studying for finals, and my eyes blew out. When I got to Harvard, I called my mother and I said, you know what? I think I might need to take a sabbatical or a break or something because my eyes are gone. And she said, well, here's the deal. It looks like your uncle's on track to graduate with honors from Harvard. If you don't graduate with honors from Harvard, we won't be at the graduation because his honors were nothing. You know, anything
That's
less
amazing.
than that is a disgrace.
So did you feel stressed at the time about that, the way your mom was pushing you like that?
It's stress, but it's stress. It's sort of in the way that Tiger Woods describes the stress of his relationship with his father. It is, yes, you do feel at times that you're being pushed to the breaking point, but that when you realize that you haven't been broken, it makes you stronger.
Yeah, yeah. How did you go from one thing to another one in business? You went into real estate, then you went to management, you went from one thing to another. How did you progress like that?
I just didn't think that anybody was servicing me the way I wanted to be serviced. So what happened was I was doing my deals, and I started buying apartment buildings, and the guy who was doing my apartment loans, I didn't think was doing a particularly good job. So I opened a mortgage company, right? And then, you know, when I was trying to find more deals faster, better deals further below market, I didn't think that the realtor was doing a particularly good job. So I opened a realty company, and so on.
That's amazing. What would you say to people in the poor areas, quote unquote poor areas, that feel that they can't really do it because the bank won't let them have money? You know, you had your parents there, you went to Harvard, so it looked as though you had a little more advantage than a lot of blacks today. What would you say to them, those who think that they can't get the money, they just can't do it?
Well, I own a mortgage company, and I've seen gardeners who bought a few houses in the 70s pull out several $100,000, in some cases several $1 million, and they've never read a book in their life, and they didn't have anybody handing them anything on a silver platter.
So I read also in your bio that you highly recommend that people go into real estate because it's a good investment, and it's one that doesn't fade away as other investment will. If you don't have the money to go into real estate and you would like to get into it, what is the first step to it?
Well, there are some pretty favorable loans these days. I mean, if you have just the first step is pay your bills on time, whatever bills you have. Protect your credit, right? Because if your credit is good, with very, very minimal resources, you can buy a house,
Yeah.
right? And so the very first presentation I ever did, the very first, quote, seminar that I did, was to 6 black families in Upland, right? And in that room, there was probably about $200,000 worth of equity per family, right? So there was about $1.2 million of equity sitting in that room, and all of those people, thought of themselves as, I wouldn't say poor, but certainly very modest in terms of their position in life.
Yeah.
But what people don't understand is that if you have, if you or anybody in your family has a home, you have a lot more in the way of resources than I started with. I mean, when I came out of college, I had nothing. That first deal I did, I had nothing. I came out of law school dead broke, and my mother said, "You won't be coming back to our house to live, so you better find someplace to live."
A lot of people, in my family especially, they buy homes, but they don't use them. They pay it off, or
Exactly.
they just pay off. They don't have the confidence to do it. How do they get that? What would you encourage them?
Well, the whole reason I formed Equinair was precisely because of that person. Because there are people running around Baldwin Hills and Ladera Heights and Windsor Hills
Yeah.
with $700,000 of equity, and they're clipping coupons, right? And I can't get my mind around that. So I formed Equinair to say to that person, look, even if for some reason you don't think that you have the wherewithal or the financial savvy to do it yourself, this is a plug-and-play system. You plug into this Equinair model, and you can completely check out. You don't have to do anything else, and the system will take over from there.
A lot of people feel that if they're paid their homes off or they have it down to minimum payments, They don't want to go into debt again. They feel they're afraid that they won't be able to keep that particular new note going. What would you say to them?
I would say that if you live a life defined by fear, it is not going to be a very worthwhile life. Right? You have to at some point get beyond being paralyzed by fear and say one of two things. Either I accept my current circumstances and I'm comfortable with it, and that's perfectly fine, because that's important. You know, not everybody needs to be driving around in a Ferrari. All right? If you're comfortable with where you are, then that's fine. But don't not be comfortable, but then be afraid to do anything about it.
I want to, we're out of time for this segment.
Sure.
And when I come back, I want to talk to you about fear. A little more about your relationship with God. I don't know if you're a Christian and how much that plays into your life. Everybody and their mom in the black community go to church, but yet I notice that their life are filled with fear. They can't seem to function without having some leader, some preacher, somebody telling them what to do. And when we come back for the next segment, I want to start out with the fear, how to get over that fear, what caused that fear, and how to get past it. I really, and your company is located in the LA area?
I've got an office in Mid-Wilshire, and I have an office in Covina.
Oh, okay. And the business is called?
Equinair.
Equinair. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jesse Lee Peterson, founder and president of a nonprofit organization called BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And we are rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. Primary focus is on the black man, but we deal with all men. I believe in putting back God's order. God in Christ, Christ in man, man over woman, and woman over children. And when we can bring that order back, all communities will change. Within the black community, the primary reason black folks are screwed up, not all but most, is because women are running the homes and the communities. And as long as women are in charge, you're going to have hell and destruction. So we're trying to turn that around within the black community. Today we're dealing with entrepreneurship. One of my desires is to see more black men go into business for themselves. I mean, it is absolutely the way to go. I have an expert, Kwame Granderson. Am I right about that?
Yes.
And he is the founder and CEO of Equinair. Thank you for staying over. The reason he has on the same suit is because we're taping 2 segments in the same day. He can afford a second suit. Thank you for staying over.
I appreciate it.
Equinair, what is that?
Equinair is a one-stop solution to real estate investing. It's a mortgage company, a realty company, construction company, and property management company, and all under one roof.
I know that you graduated from UCLA, straight A's all the way through, and then Harvard, and now you're into business for yourself. How much did Harvard play in you starting your own business or your life today?
Harvard was very important to my being a lawyer. When I was a lawyer for 7 years before I started my own companies, and I sort of started them at the same time that I was a lawyer. So Harvard was very important for that, but it wasn't nearly as important for the entrepreneurial part of my path. What was more important to that was the fact that I had role models in my parents who were also interested in real estate, and I kind of looked to them for guidance. And so that was much more important to my success in real estate.
A lot of people are going to say, well, it's easy for you to talk. You had both parents in the home. You went to UCLA, graduated from Harvard. Do you have to go to Harvard to start a business and become successful in that business?
Well, if you had to go to Harvard to have a successful business, there would be a lot fewer successful businesses out there. I mean, you know, the irony is a lot of very successful entrepreneurs don't even have a formal education. I mean, they dropped out of high school, you know, and you know, as far as I know, I don't even think Bill Gates finished college.
Right.
So you don't need to go to Harvard Law School to have a successful business. I think what you need is you know, work ethic, drive, motivation, that sort of thing.
And no excuses.
No excuses.
How do you live without any excuses?
I mean, no excuses is a phrase I use a lot in my seminars, to just make the basic point that what you don't want to do is allow excuses to define who you are. It is not so much that there's never a justifiable excuse. Of course, if you're going someplace and there's a 4-lane traffic accident, is there a good excuse for being late? Yes, but deep in your heart that the real reason you're typically late is not because of traffic accidents, it's because you didn't leave early enough.
Right.
Generally speaking.
Yes.
Right. So there might be an instance where you got to someplace late because of a justifiable excuse. The problem is when that excuse becomes, the way of defining your whole modus operandi.
We talked about fear last time we were together, and lots of people have fear about everything, really. What causes fear, and how do you overcome that?
What causes fear is generally ignorance, which is why we're afraid of what we don't know, we're afraid of the dark, we're afraid of anything that we don't fully understand.
Yes.
Right? So that's why knowledge is so important, because the more you're able to understand yourself and the world around you, the less afraid you are. A couple weeks back, I jumped out of a plane from 13,000 feet because I was tackling this very issue. I said, what, I'm not all that fond of heights, and I thought, but if and so you look at somebody jumping out of a plane, you think, okay, that's a very dangerous thing to do. But I'm talking to this guy who's a 60-year-old man who's had 10,000 successful jumps, and I thought, okay, well, what are the odds that this guy could jump 10,000 times, be okay, and on my one jump, something's going to happen to me. Right?
And so you couldn't think of anything but a plane to just jump out of. How about a ladder?
Yeah, well, I'm maybe I'm a little bit of an extremist, but the point is that if you have, and this is my point about knowledge.
No.
If I know, okay, this guy 10,000 jumps, successful, the plane is a stable plane, et cetera, what's the likelihood that something's going to happen to me? Slim to zero. Not impossible, slim to zero. So is that something I should justifiably be afraid of? No. There's very real things that you should be afraid of, but that's not one of them.
Right.
Okay. So what I do is I try to get as much information about something. For example, business. If you're going into business, and you whatever it is, a restaurant, a convenience store, anything, and you've done an adequate amount of homework, that homework will tell you whether or not you're more likely than not to succeed. The rest of it is just hard work. There's
Yes.
nothing to be afraid of.
Hard work. A lot of people are, especially with real estate, they're afraid to go, as we talked about earlier, because of not being able to pay the note. They may lose it. And what I've noticed is that most of the time when you take that type of risk, well, let me ask, are you a risk taker, or do you have to know what you're doing before you do it?
I take calculated risks.
Meaning?
So in other words, I don't go to Vegas. When I go to Vegas, I take $5 and I play the quarter slot machines, and when my $5 is done, I'm done. Because I'm walking in the door with a guy with a big sign at the front saying, the odds are stacked against you. This entire environment is designed for you to lose money, right? And that experience is worth about $5 to me.
Yes.
Right? So that doesn't make sense. But in order to succeed in any business, you have to take a certain amount of risk.
You said earlier that you were the type of person who had self-control, and that helps as well in life. Do you have self-control in every area of your life, or just running real estate, a real estate business?
If you were to put German chocolate cake in front of me on the wrong day, I probably would not have enough self-control not to eat it. So no, not with respect to everything that I do. But I try to be a relatively disciplined person. I'm not obsessive about it. There are mornings where I wake up late because I'm tired, and and there Saturdays where I sleep in and all of those normal things.
How many hours do you put into work per day?
Per day, probably 10 hours,
And how many days a week?
6 to 7,
6 to 7 days a week? Every week?
pretty much.
Really?
Now there are different, there are different kinds of work. I mean, that is not to say that I'm sitting in an office on a Sunday. What that means is that in order to grow a business, if you're not always thinking about how to improve it, businesses, they're either growing or shrinking.
Yes.
It's never status quo.
Yes.
Right. So if you're not growing your business is shrinking whether you want to believe it or not. Right. So my objective at this particular stage is to try to always think of ways to improve as a business person, and that is pretty much a round the clock proposition.
So it is necessary to put that much time into your business.
Exactly, and that's why being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. A lot of people just think that everybody should be an entrepreneur. That is absolutely not the case.
Yeah,
there are certain people who perform much better in a structured environment where they know what their parameters are, and they greatly prefer that. To be an entrepreneur, you have to sort of like a little bit of chaos, because there is always chaos. I don't care how.
You say that again.
I don't care how good you are at running a business. There's always going to be chaos when you're running your own business.
I also read that you were married and you have a daughter.
Yes.
Does that working all those hours, putting that amount of time into a business, does it interfere with your family life, your marriage?
Well, my wife is also part of the business.
Okay.
So she runs the mortgage company. In fact, she helped build the mortgage company. So it probably would more if we weren't in the same business.
Yes.
And actually, even in getting married, I was hoping to find someone that would be, as enthusiastic as I was about real estate, and we could build it together.
Yes.
And that's what I found.
You said your family, or you grew up, or your family from another country.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that?
My mother's from Jamaica, and my dad's from Trinidad, so they're Caribbean.
Some black folks watching this program will say, well, that's easy for you to say. Foreigners are coming in, black or white, and they're just bringing truckloads of money. It's easier for them. What would be your response to that?
Well, I can't speak for other foreigners. I mean, there are certain foreigners who come with a lot of money. When we came to this country, we were homeless, sleeping in taxi cabs in New York.
Really?
Right? So I'm relatively confident that the resources we were working with when we got here were not equivalent to the average person who was born in this country.
But it is true that, for the most part, blacks who come from other countries seem to do better here in this country than blacks who are living here. Why is that?
Well, I guess part of it is the same reason that any foreigner from any country ends up being slightly more motivated. I mean, if you take the average Indian from India or Chinese person from China, the people who end up in the United States tend to be the most motivated segment of of their respective population often, right? So it is not the case that if you went to China, all of the Chinese people, all billion of them, would be as motivated as the average Chinese American.
Right. Okay,
because that group is here for a reason, is because they happen to be a very ambitious subset of the population. Right. So part of it is that. But part of it is also that there's a certain kind of sort of survival instinct that kicks in when you come to a foreign country and you have no resources, where you just feel like you just better hit the ground running, because you don't know where your next meal is. There's no level of comfort or complacency whatsoever. You literally feel like you're going to starve unless you just are working 24/7.
When I come back from this break, I want to ask about goals. Should you set goals? And if so, how far in advance should you set them? We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your emails. Before we went to break, I asked about goals, and we only have a few minutes left, so I want to move a little faster. Should we set goals, and if so, well, should we set goals?
I think goals are critical. I don't think you can achieve much of anything without focusing on achieving it, which is what a goal is.
Give me an example, and the reason I asked for the example, because a lot of times you don't know what you need. Even if you're in business, you don't really know what you need until you need it. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't know what you need, how can you set a goal?
Let's just take a very simple business like a restaurant. And you just opened a restaurant and you're selling barbecue, okay, on the corner. Okay, you know that goal number one is to break even, right? So what you set as your initial goal is you figure out what's your overhead and how much is it going to take to break even, and you set that as your first goal, right? Because that means you stay in business perpetually, right? Yes. If you can break even perpetually, you stay in business perpetually, right? So the problem is when most people start a business, they don't do that. They're so happy and proud of the fact that their name is up on a sign, right, that they don't stop to figure out what it's going to take to keep the name up there.
Yes. When will you know that your business is succeeding, that you're okay, you can just move forward? Is there like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Is there a time that you can know for sure?
You're succeeding when your lights are on and your phones are working and you're paying your bills, okay?
Yeah.
I think, because you could be, a lot of people say, oh, well, once you hit that 3-year mark,
yeah, I heard that. That's
okay,
why I asked.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen people get to the 4-year mark and then go out of business the next day.
Yeah.
Right? It's totally irrelevant to me.
What I've heard is like the 5-year, if you pass 5 years,
Nonsense.
you're pretty safe.
I've seen people in business for 8 years, and the market changes just slightly. I know a guy who sold furniture. He had a furniture sort of showroom, and he was in business for about 10 years, and the competition increased from furniture being made in China and being imported less expensively than he was selling it for. He was out of business in 6 months.
You provide whatever service a person would need in real estate. Is real estate the best, the number one investment that a person can and should start out with?
I think for someone who is starting from either a low or modest position, real estate is absolutely the best vehicle. I think stock is for people who they're already wealthy and they're preserving wealth. Stock is excellent for that.
Oh, okay.
I do not think stock is a very effective way of getting you from a position of modest means to wealth.
How do you find the best realtor to work with? People, a lot of people don't trust lawyers and realtors and doctors nowadays.
And they shouldn't.
Yeah. How do you find the best person to work with?
The best person would be someone who's referred to you by someone else, and that person had a good experience with them. I mean, that's the best, obviously. But if short of that, you really, I think, have to do your homework on the person and their company, and then sit down and look them in the eye, right? Because at the end of the day, business is about, you have to be able to have, if somebody is determined to rip you off, they're going to rip you off no matter what you sign, what your contract says. It doesn't matter if they're a lawyer, if they're not a lawyer, they're going to rip you off.
That is true. Excuses. A lot of black Americans feel that they can't make it because the white man is trying to keep them down. What do you say to that, to those folks?
I have not spent a lot of time on focusing on whether or not, if there's somebody out there trying to keep me down, I have not met the person, and I don't spend a lot of time looking for that person. If I'm pursuing something, I run into an obstacle, I try, you know, plan B, plan C, plan D, and my experience has been that one of those plans ends up getting me around the obstacle.
So do you believe that white people waking up and trying to figure out how to keep the blacks down?
I've not met such a person. You know, I'm not saying that they're not out there. I don't know. I've never met someone in my business dealings who says, yes, when I wake up in the morning, before I eat my breakfast, I conspire with other white people to figure out how. I don't know.
And you do business with all races?
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I do business with anybody who is interested in the kind of business that I do.
Do you think black Americans should depend on so-called black leadership, people like Jesse Jackson and Louis Farrakhan and the black preachers? Should they turn away from those folks and start thinking for themselves, or depend on those people to help them?
I think leadership is important in any community. I mean, I think it's important to have leaders and role models. What I think is not healthy is if you depend on anybody else, whether it be, you know, Jesse Jackson or Louis Farrakhan or anybody else, to the point where you completely stop thinking for yourself. I don't think that's ever productive, and I'm guessing if I've had conversations with Jesse Jackson, and I'm sure he would agree with that. I mean, I don't think that's ever productive.
You think Jesse Jackson would agree with that?
I think he would. I think any respectable leader would say that it is not advisable for someone to be completely dependent on anybody else for any reason.
Yeah, and you're right, but I seriously doubt that Jesse Jackson would agree with you on that. Because if blacks started to think for themselves, then he would end up on the soup line. So he needs them, you know, down and out. Values. Where do you get your values from?
My parents.
Your parents. And define values.
Values to me is, you know, those core principles that you use to govern your everyday life, and both with respect to business, with respect to relationships, those sort of 3 or 4 principles that are the operating principles for how you interact with the world.
Are you a Christian?
I'm a non-denominational Christian.
Non-denominational Christian. And what does that mean to you?
What it means is that I read the Bible, but I don't go to a particular church. I don't adhere to a particular denomination. So in other words, before the denominations, you know, there was Catholicism, and before the Reformation, right? And in my mind, there was, before the Reformation, before Catholicism, there was Christ, and that's what we should all be adhering to.
Yeah.
That's my personal belief.
What is the most important thing to you? What's the most important thing?
The most important in
your
just
life.
In general,
Yes.
Family.
Family. And why is that so important?
Because I think that's your core. I think, you know, everything about you stems from how you relate to your family. If you come from an abusive family, you're an abusive person, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Do you think that had not, well, you don't know this, but I want to ask because there are so many people who don't have family. Do you think that if you had not had a family, fathers and mothers to guide you, father and mother to guide you, would you be the same person today, you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
And no, in fact, I don't know so, because my father used to drive me to school every day and just pound me with principle after principle after principle. I mean, he would drive me to school and he would say, you know, the only thing more important than education on this planet is water. Every day, every day,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that tends to have an effect on you.
I am, and I laugh because I'm raising a 12-year-old right now that we took into our home for young men, and I drive him to school every day, and I'm doing the same thing with him. And I was just wondering this morning, maybe I'm overdoing it, but when I'm riding with him, I'm trying to get him some clues as to how life works.
You're not.
You got to work hard. You got to be honest.
You're not overdoing it, because what will happen is you'll think that maybe he's going in one ear and out the other,
Yeah.
and 20 years from now he'll say, "Remember what you said that one Tuesday when we were going to?" That stuck.
He told me this morning that he wanted an iPod, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so why do you want one? He said, well, all the kids at school have one.
Mm-hmm.
His friends have one. And I said, well, if you really want one, you're going to have to really bring some good grades home, you know, keep your room clean, be responsible, and then I'll get you one. And he kind of got a little upset about that. That is the right advice for him, right?
My parents' approach was exactly the opposite of that. My parents' approach was, whether or not we decide to get you an iPod is our decision. You're going to get straight A's regardless. In other words, it was never a quid pro quo. If you get straight A's, we will do this. We'll do this whether we feel like it or not. You're going to get straight A's no matter what.
Did you ever rebel against your parents' teaching while growing up? Was there a period when you rebelled against those things?
I mean, I think all kids rebel at some point. I mean, so yeah, did I do stupid stuff that they didn't approve of? Absolutely. I mean, you know, I don't think I would have been a normal teenager if I didn't. Yeah. I don't think that they were too fond of the fact that I was running around pop locking in the middle of the street, or spinning around on cardboard boxes in my driveway. So that maybe that was a form of rebellion. I don't know.
Do you consider yourself an upright man, a righteous man?
Sure.
Is that necessary to succeed in life?
I think you have to have character and conviction to succeed at anything. You have to stand for something, right? Because and unfortunately, when you stand for something, not everybody's going to like you.
Right.
Right. And my belief is not everybody has to like you, but they have to respect you.
You sound white. You know, what most black would call white, because you speak well. You have a white man demeanor about yourself. How did you deal with that growing up?
Well, I went to Beverly Hills High School, but all my friends went to Westchester, right? So I had, you know, what you might call a dual personality. You know, I'd hang out in Westchester, we'd go to clubs, whatever else. I was one person. I get to Beverly Hills, I was a different person. At some point, it got to the point as I got further and further along in my career, I realized that you have to be one person.
Yes.
And you have to be consistent. And not everybody's going to like that. And you have to decide as a person who you are and what you're going to project to the world. And some people will respect it and some people won't. And you just have to be true to who you are.
Have you been were you called names as a result of making the decision that you're going to speak properly, you're going to work well, hard, you're going to do what's right? Did they call you names for that?
There's a certain amount of alienation that results when if somebody says, well, you know, black people speak this way, you don't speak this way, therefore you're not black. For me, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think.
Yes.
I do what I have to do. To the extent that that implicates them, great. To the extent that it doesn't, that's fine too. And ultimately, you know, history will be the verdict. Will render its verdict, I should say.
Because of time, are you an emotional man?
I try to keep my emotions under control, because I think, you know, in a business context at least, if you're too emotional, that can be problematic.
How about at home? Yes or no?
No.
We're out of time. Thank you so much for coming
Thanks.
in. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
I appreciate having me.
God bless you. And thank you for tuning in. Have a good one.